The fluorescent lights of Sterling Dynamics hummed their endless mechanical prayer at 11:47 p.m., casting shadows that stretched like accusing fingers across the polished marble floors of the 42nd floor executive suite. Christopher Smith pushed his cleaning cart past the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the city's glittering sprawl, the wheels squeaking in rhythm with his thoughts. Thoughts that always circled back to his daughter, Emma, asleep in their studio apartment 12 miles away, watched over by Mrs. Chen from next door, who charged $20 he could barely afford. The mop bucket sloshed as he turned the corner toward the conference room, but he stopped. Voices, sharp and cutting through the late-night silence like broken glass. "You think you can just waltz in here with your diversity hire credentials and lecture me about protocol?" The voice belonged to Richard Thornton, Senior VP of Operations, a man whose cologne cost more than Christopher's monthly rent. "Your predecessor knew his place. Maybe you need to learn yours." Christopher had learned long ago that invisible was safe. Invisible meant keeping his job. Invisible meant Emma's medication got paid for, her ballet classes continued, her smile stayed bright even though her mother had walked away 3 years ago, leaving nothing but a note that said, "I can't do this anymore," and a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Whiskers that Emma still slept with every night. But the second voice made him pause. It was steady, controlled, but Christopher could hear the tremor beneath it. The kind of controlled fear he recognized from his own mirror every morning. "Mr. Thornton, this conversation is over. The audit results stand. If you have concerns about my leadership, take them to the board." Victoria Sterling, the CEO. Christopher had seen her exactly 4 times in the 8 months he'd worked here, always from a distance, always surrounded by people in expensive suits, always moving with the kind of purpose that suggested she knew exactly where she was going. "The board?" Thornton laughed, a sound like ice cracking. "Sweetheart, I've been with this company for 19 years. Your father hired me personally. You've been CEO for what, 6 months? The board will listen to me long before they listen to a 34-year-old who inherited her position because daddy died and didn't have any sons." Christopher's hand tightened on the mop handle. He should leave. This wasn't his business. This was the kind of corporate warfare that happened in glass towers while people like him mopped the floors and tried to remain invisible enough to survive another day. But then he heard it. The slight catch in Victoria Sterling's breath, the pause that spoke of shock and hurt penetrating professional armor. Christopher thought of Emma, of the day she'd come home from school crying because Tyler Morrison had told her she was weird for not having a mom, and how she'd looked at him with those huge hazel eyes and asked if there was something wrong with them, with her. He'd told her that being different wasn't wrong, that standing up for what was right mattered more than fitting in, that kindness was strength, not weakness. Christopher knocked on the conference room door. The voices stopped abruptly. He pushed the door open, keeping his eyes down, playing the role he'd perfected. "Sorry to interrupt. Thought the room was empty. Scheduled to clean the executive floor before the overnight security shift change at midnight." Victoria Sterling stood near the head of the long conference table, her dark hair pulled back in a bun that had begun to come loose, her charcoal suit jacket still perfectly pressed despite the late hour. She was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 5'5" in heels, but she held herself with a rigid posture that suggested years of practice at taking up space in rooms that didn't want her there. Richard Thornton turned, his face flushed with anger or alcohol or both. He was tall, silver-haired, everything about him projecting authority and entitlement. "We're in the middle of a private conversation, Janitor. Come back later." "Building policy says all executive offices need to be cleaned before the overnight security shift change at midnight," Christopher said, wheeling his cart into the room with deliberate slowness. "Fire marshal's been cracking down on cleaning schedules, something about emergency protocols." Thornton's jaw clenched. "I said come back later."
Christopher began spraying the glass conference table, the sound of the cleaning solution breaking the tension like a bell. Sure thing. Just need to note it in the log. Building supervisor is pretty strict about documentation. Name's Christopher Smith, by the way. You're Mr. Thornton, right? Senior VP? I'll make sure to mention you specifically asked me to skip your area. He pulled out his phone, pretending to type. They take pictures of incomplete cleaning zones now. Insurance liability thing. It was a gamble. Christopher's heart hammered against his ribs so hard he was certain they could both hear it. He'd likely just cost himself this job, and with it, Emma's stability, their apartment, everything he'd been fighting to build since Sarah left. But he'd looked at Victoria Sterling's face for just a moment when he entered, and he'd seen something he recognized. The expression of someone trying desperately not to break, trying to maintain dignity while someone systematically stripped it away. He'd worn that face before. He'd worn it when Sarah's parents told him he'd never be good enough for their daughter. He'd worn it at the hospital when they told him Emma's juvenile arthritis would require expensive ongoing treatment. He'd worn it at job interviews where they looked at his community college degree and moved his resume to the bottom of the pile. Thornton stared at him, calculation moving behind his eyes. Finally, he grabbed his briefcase. This conversation isn't over, Victoria. He walked past Christopher without another glance, his shoulder deliberately knocking against the cleaning cart hard enough to rattle the bottles. The door closed with a soft click that seemed too quiet for the weight of what had just happened. Victoria Sterling stood motionless for a long moment, her hands gripping the back of a leather chair. Then she released it, smoothed her jacket, and turned to face Christopher with a carefully neutral expression. "Thank you," she said quietly. "But you didn't need to do that." Christopher focused on cleaning the table, keeping his movements steady and professional. "Just following the cleaning schedule, ma'am." The cleaning schedule. She almost smiled. There's no policy about fire marshal inspections of cleaning schedules. No, ma'am, there isn't. But there should be. She walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "You're Christopher Smith. You started in March. You work the executive floors Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. You're never late. You're never absent. The previous facilities manager noted in your file that you're exceptionally thorough and respectful of private spaces." Christopher paused mid-wipe. "You know my employment file?" She knows everyone's employment file. All 4,372 people who work for Sterling Dynamics. It's my company now. My responsibility. She turned to face him, and in the light from the windows she could see that her eyes were red-rimmed, though her makeup was perfect. "You have a daughter, Emma, 8 years old. You list Mrs. Chen as your emergency contact. You turned down the health insurance upgrade during open enrollment, even though it would have covered more of your daughter's medical expenses. The premium increase was $300 a month. Couldn't afford it." "Why not?" She asked it like she genuinely wanted to know, not like she was interrogating him. Christopher hesitated. This was the longest conversation he'd ever had with anyone above facilities management level. "Ballet classes. She loves them. They help with her joint mobility. Her doctor recommended it for the arthritis. The $300 pays for the classes and her specialized shoes." Victoria Sterling looked at him for a long moment, and Christopher saw something shift in her expression. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. "My father built this company from nothing. He started as a software engineer in a garage in 1987. By the time he died last year, we had offices in 17 countries. But he never forgot what it was like to choose between rent and groceries, between heat and medicine. He built Sterling Dynamics on the principle that a company's strength comes from taking care of its people, all of its people." She walked back to the table, picking up a leather portfolio Christopher hadn't noticed before. "Richard Thornton has been systematically undermining me since the day I became CEO. He's been with the company nearly 2 decades. He has allies on the board. He's made it very clear that he believes I'm unqualified, inexperienced, and only in this position because of my last name." Her voice remained steady, professional, but Christopher heard the exhaustion beneath it. What you just witnessed was him threatening to torpedo an internal audit that found irregularities in his division's expense reports. He's been using company funds for personal expenses. Expensive dinners, luxury travel, gifts for people who can influence board votes. "Why are you telling me this?" Christopher asked.
"Because you just risked your job to help me," Victoria said. "And because I think you understand something that Richard Thornton never will, that power isn't about your title or your salary or how long you've been in a building. It's about what you choose to do when someone needs help, and helping them costs you something." Christopher thought of Emma, of the promise he'd made to her after Sarah left, that he would always be there, always protect her, always make sure she knew she was loved and valued and worth everything. "I should finish cleaning," he said quietly. "Yes," Victoria Sterling agreed. She walked to the door, then paused. "Mr. Smith, tomorrow morning you'll receive an email from HR about a review of your benefits package. There's a new program we're piloting for employees with dependents who have ongoing medical needs. It's called the Sterling Family Foundation Support Initiative. You'll qualify." "Ma'am, I don't need—" "It's not charity," she interrupted. "It's what my father built this company to do, and it's what I intend to continue doing, regardless of how many Richard Thorntons try to stop me." She opened the door, then looked back. "You didn't have to help me tonight. Thank you for choosing to anyway." After she left, Christopher stood in the empty conference room, the smell of cleaning solution sharp in his nostrils, his hands shaking slightly as the adrenaline faded. Through the windows, the city sprawled out in all directions, millions of lights representing millions of people, all of them fighting their own battles, all of them just trying to survive one more day. He finished cleaning the conference room, then the executive suite, then the break room with its expensive coffee machine and its refrigerator full of organic juices that cost more per bottle than his hourly wage. At 6:47 a.m., he clocked out, caught the bus home, and let himself into the studio apartment where Emma was already awake, sitting at their small table with Mrs. Chen, eating toast and drawing in her notebook. "Daddy!" She jumped up, and he caught her carefully, mindful of her joints on cold mornings. She smelled of strawberry shampoo and childhood. "Hey, Butterfly, what are you drawing?" "A castle, with a princess who's also a scientist. She's inventing flying cars." "Sounds like she's pretty smart." "The smartest," Emma confirmed seriously. "Mrs. Chen said I could use her colored pencils." Christopher hugged Mrs. Chen, paid her the $20, and made Emma breakfast while she told him about her plans for the day. School, then ballet, then she wanted to finish her library book about Marie Curie. He listened, nodding in the right places, but his mind kept returning to the conference room, to Victoria Sterling's red-rimmed eyes and steady voice, to the way Richard Thornton had said "sweetheart" like it was a weapon. He'd probably made a mistake. He'd probably painted a target on his back. But when Emma looked up at him with her huge hazel eyes and asked if he thought princesses who were scientists could change the world, he said yes, absolutely, without hesitation. Because he'd been teaching her all along that standing up for what was right mattered more than staying safe. Now he'd have to prove he believed it too. Christopher's life operated on a precise schedule, the kind of rigid routine that people with no margin for error built to survive. Wake at 7 a.m., make Emma breakfast, pack her lunch with the careful attention to nutrition that comes from reading every article about childhood arthritis management, walk her 3 blocks to Rosewood Elementary, take the bus to the community health clinic where he had a standing appointment every Monday morning to get his blood pressure checked, a condition of the reduced-fee treatment plan for Emma's medications.
Tuesday through Friday mornings were for sleep, but the fractured kind, where every noise from the apartment above jolted him awake with calculations about whether they could afford to move, whether he should pick up extra shifts, whether Emma's next rheumatology appointment would bring good news, or the kind of carefully delivered bad news that came with expensive treatment recommendations. He'd get up around 2 p.m., make phone calls, insurance companies, medical billing departments, the ballet school to confirm Emma's schedule, then grocery shop with a precision that would impress a military quartermaster. Every dollar allocated, Every purchase justified. Store-brand cereal, yes. Fresh fruit, carefully rationed. Meat twice a week. Vegetables always, because Emma needed nutrition, even when nutrition meant less money for everything else. At 4:30 p.m., he'd pick Emma up from the after-school program, help her with homework at the public library, where the heat was free and the space was bigger than their studio, then take her to ballet on Mondays and Wednesdays, or let her play at the park on other days while he read, always nonfiction, always about business or management, or something that might help him eventually climb out of this hole he'd been living in since Sarah left. Dinner at 6:30 p.m., bath at 7:30 p.m., though on cold days he had to warm the bathroom first with the space heater because their building's heating was unpredictable. Stories at 8 p.m., sometimes from the library books, sometimes ones he made up about brave princesses and kind knights, and happy endings that felt increasingly fictional. Lights out at 8:30, though he'd stay beside her bed until she fell asleep, watching her small chest rise and fall, thinking about how fragile everything was, how one medical emergency or one lost job stood between them and disaster. Then he'd prepare for work, pack his dinner, check that his phone was charged, lay out Emma's clothes for the next day, leave detailed notes from Mrs. Chen about Emma's medication schedule and what to do if her joints were bothering her. At 10 p.m., he'd leave, locking the door 3 times, checking it twice more from the hallway. The night shift at Sterling Dynamics paid $17 an hour, $3 more than his previous job at a warehouse, and it came with health insurance that covered some of them as treatment costs, though never enough. He took pride in his work, in the way the floors gleamed under his attention, in the spotless windows and the organized supply closets. He'd been promoted from general cleaning to executive floor specialist after 2 months, which came with a 50-cent raise and the responsibility for the most visible spaces in the building. Most nights the building was empty except for the occasional late-working executive and the overnight security staff. Christopher knew them all by name: Marcus, who worked the front desk and had 3 kids in college; Jennifer, who patrolled floors 20 through 40 and was saving money to open a restaurant; David, the overnight supervisor, who'd given Christopher extra shifts when Emma's medication costs spiked last month. He'd developed a rhythm with the building itself, learning its sounds and smells, knowing which lights flickered and needed reporting, which executive offices were used daily and which sat empty, monuments to corporate hierarchy. He cleaned the gym on the 38th floor, the executive dining room on the 45th, the meditation room on the 39th that nobody used but that smelled like expensive essential oils. Wednesday morning, 3 days after the incident with Richard Thornton, Christopher found an envelope taped to his cleaning cart. Inside was a memo on Sterling Dynamics letterhead. "Your benefits review has been completed. Please see HR on Friday at 9 a.m. This is not disciplinary." His stomach dropped anyway. Friday at 9 a.m. meant missing sleep, meant rearranging Emma's morning routine, meant asking Mrs. Chen to come early and paying her extra. It meant walking into a building full of day shift people who would look at him in his janitor's uniform and see someone who didn't belong in their spaces during daylight hours. But the memo said to come, so Friday morning at 8:59 a.m., Christopher walked through Sterling Dynamics' main entrance for the first time during business hours. The lobby was transformed, full of people in sharp suits moving with purpose. The coffee shop in the corner crowded with executives getting their morning caffeine. Everything polished and bright, and so different from the empty nighttime building he knew. He took the elevator to the 15th floor, HR department, and checked in with a receptionist who barely glanced at him before gesturing to a waiting area. He sat in a chair that probably cost more than his couch, watching people move through the space with the casual confidence of people who belonged. Mr. Smith, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional smile, approached. "I'm Dorothy Reeves, Director of Benefits. Thank you for coming in. Please, follow me." Her office was small but organized, walls covered with photos of children and grandchildren. She gestured for him to sit, then pulled up something on her computer. "I'm going to be direct with you, Mr. Smith, because I imagine you're nervous and I want to put you at ease. You're not in trouble. You're not being disciplined. This meeting is about an expansion of your benefits package." The memo mentioned the Sterling Family Foundation Support Initiative, Christopher said carefully. Yes, it's a new program that Miss Sterling implemented last month. It provides enhanced coverage for employees with dependents who have chronic medical conditions. Based on your file and your daughter's diagnosis, you qualify. She turned her monitor to show him a spreadsheet. Your current insurance covers 60% of Emma's treatment costs after deductible. Under this program, that increases to 95%. Additionally, the program provides a stipend for therapeutic activities recommended by a physician. In Emma's case, her ballet classes would be fully covered. Christopher stared at the numbers. I don't understand. Why? Because Miss Sterling believes that our employees shouldn't have to choose between their children's health and their rent, Dorothy said simply. Her father started this company with that philosophy. She's expanding it. She clicked to another screen. There's more. You're being reclassified from contract worker to full-time employee, which comes with additional benefits: vacation time, sick leave, retirement matching, and your base pay is increasing to $22 an hour. $22? Christopher's voice came out strangled. That was an extra $1,000 a month. That was stability. That was breathing room. That's the new minimum wage for all full-time Sterling employees. Miss Sterling announced the change company-wide last week. Dorothy's expression softened. Mr. Smith, I want to be clear about something. This isn't charity. You earned this position. Your performance reviews are exemplary. Your supervisor says you're the most reliable employee in facilities. This is about recognizing value and ensuring that the people who make this company function are properly compensated. Christopher couldn't speak for a moment. He thought about the conference room, about Victoria Sterling's red-rimmed eyes, about the calculated risk he'd taken. Miss Sterling did this because of what happened Tuesday night. Miss Sterling did this because it's the right thing to do, Dorothy corrected gently. But yes, what happened Tuesday night brought several issues to her attention, including the fact that our benefit structure hasn't been reviewed in 6 years and that too many of our employees were struggling unnecessarily. She handed him a folder. Your new benefits package effective immediately. HR will process the paperwork. You'll see the changes in next week's paycheck. Christopher took the folder with shaking hands. Inside were documents that represented a different life. One where he didn't wake up in a panic about medical bills, where Emma's future didn't hinge on him staying healthy enough to work 80-hour weeks. Thank you, he managed. Thank Miss Sterling. And, Mr. Smith, what you did Tuesday night, interrupting that meeting, took courage. A lot of people in this building talk about company values. You actually lived them. Christopher left the HR office in a daze, rode the elevator down to the lobby, walked out into the morning sunshine. He called Mrs. Chen from the sidewalk, told her he'd be home in 40 minutes, thanked her profusely. Then he stood there, people flowing around him, and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. That afternoon he picked Emma up from school and took her to the good ice cream place, the one they usually walked past because it was too expensive. He ordered her a sundae with all the toppings and watched her eyes go wide with delight. Is it someone's birthday? No, Butterfly. Just felt like celebrating. Celebrating what? A good day. Sometimes you get good days.
That night, he showed up for his shift at Sterling Dynamics at 11 p.m. as usual, but everything felt different. He was an employee now, not a contractor. He had vacation time. He had sick leave. Emma's ballet classes were covered. The weight he'd been carrying for 3 years had shifted, not gone, but lighter, more manageable. He was cleaning the 38th floor break room when his supervisor, Terry Michaels, found him. Terry was a good guy, former Army, ran facilities management with military precision but genuine care for his staff. "Smith, got a minute?" Christopher straightened. "Yes, sir." "Heard about your benefits update. Well deserved." Terry leaned against the counter.
Listen, I'm not going to ask you what happened Tuesday night with Thornton, but I want you to be aware of something. Richard Thornton has allies in this building. He's been here a long time. He's got people who owe him favors, people who share his perspective on how things should run. Are you saying I'm in danger of losing my job? No. Ms. Sterling's made it clear that you're protected, but protected doesn't mean comfortable. Some people around here aren't happy about the benefits changes. They think it's too expensive, too idealistic. They're going to be watching for any excuse to prove Miss Sterling wrong. Terry met his eyes. You're good at your job, Smith. Keep being good at it. Keep your head down. Let the executives fight their battles. I understand. Do you? Terry's expression was serious. Because I've been watching you for 8 months now. You're quiet, you're professional, but you're also someone who steps up when it matters. I saw how you helped Marcus last month when his kid was sick, covered 2 of his shifts without being asked. I know you've been tutoring Jennifer's daughter in math during your lunch breaks. You're a helper, Smith. That's admirable. But in a corporate environment, helpers sometimes get crushed by people with more power and fewer scruples. Christopher thought about Emma, about the new benefits package, about the future that had suddenly become possible. I'll be careful, he promised. Good. One more thing. You're being moved to a new section next week. Executive Floor 42. Miss Sterling's office is on that floor. So is Richard Thornton's. Given what happened, I wanted to give you a heads up. After Terry left, Christopher stood in the empty break room, the smell of cleaning solution sharp in his nostrils. Executive Floor 42. Victoria Sterling's office, the place where the real battles were being fought. He thought about pulling out, about asking for a different assignment. But then he thought about what he'd told Emma, about standing up for what was right, about courage meant doing hard things even when you were scared. He finished his shift, clocked out at 7 a.m., took the bus home through the early morning light. Emma was already awake, drawing at the table with Mrs. Chen. "Daddy, look! I drew us at the ice cream place!" The picture showed 2 stick figures with huge smiles holding enormous ice cream cones. Above them, she'd written in careful letters, "Best day ever." Christopher hugged her, breathing in her strawberry shampoo smell, feeling the delicate bones of her back beneath her t-shirt. It was a best day. We're going to have more of those, Butterfly. I promise. He meant it. Whatever came next, whatever battles waited on the executive floor 42, he would face them. Because Emma deserved best days. She deserved a father who fought for them both, who didn't back down when things got hard. He'd been running for 3 years, running from his ex-wife's abandonment, from poverty, from the feeling that he'd failed somehow. But maybe running was over. Maybe it was time to stand still and fight.
Monday night, Christopher started his new assignment on floor 42. The executive suite was different from the rest of the building, quieter, more expensively furnished, with the kind of careful design that spoke of high-dollar interior decorators. Thick carpet that muffled footsteps, original artwork on the walls, a coffee station with a machine that probably cost more than his car. Victoria Sterling's office was at the northwest corner, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking his city. Richard Thornton's was directly across the hall, same size, same view, like 2 chess pieces facing off across a board. Christopher established his routine quickly. Start with the common areas, work his way through individual offices, finish with the conference rooms. Most nights, the floor was empty by midnight. But that first Monday, he found Victoria Sterling still at her desk at 1:15 a.m., laptop open, papers spread across every surface. He knocked softly on her open door. "Ms. Sterling? Should I come back later?" She looked up, startled, then checked her watch. "Is it really past 1? I lost track of time." She stood, stretching her back with a wince. "No, please, come in. I'll get out of your way." "You don't have to leave, ma'am. I can work around you if you need to keep going." She studied him for a moment, then sat back down. "Actually, if you don't mind the company, I'd appreciate it. This building feels different at night, less hostile."
Christopher began emptying her trash, wiping down surfaces, working with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to be invisible. But Victoria kept talking, her voice tired but determined. I found 3 more irregularities in expense reports today. 2 in Thornton's division, 1 in marketing. It's like pulling thread on a sweater. The more you pull, the more unravels. I rubbed my eyes. My father used to say that corruption in a company works like cancer. You can't just treat the symptoms. You have to cut it out completely or it spreads. What are you going to do? Christopher asked, then immediately regretted the question. Sorry, that's not my business. No, it's fine. It's actually nice to talk to someone who isn't trying to manipulate me or undermine me or convince me that I'm in over my head. She leaned back in her chair. I'm presenting my findings to the board next month. Full audit results, recommended terminations, proposed oversight reforms. It's going to be ugly. Thornton won't take that well. Thornton's going to fight with everything he has. So will his allies. She met Christopher's eyes. I want you to know that if this gets worse, if there's any retaliation that affects you, I'll handle it. You won't lose your job because you helped me. With respect, ma'am, I can take care of myself. I don't doubt that, she smiled slightly. You have a daughter who loves ballet and Marie Curie. You work an overnight shift so you can be there for her during the day. You turn down better insurance to pay for her classes. You're clearly someone who knows how to fight for what matters. I'm just saying you shouldn't have to fight alone. Christopher finished cleaning her office while she returned to her laptop, and something in the quiet companionship of that shared space reminded him of the early days with Sarah, before Emma, before the fights about money and his lack of ambition and her growing resentment of their life. They used to study together in her dorm room, her working on her business degree, him on his community college classes in computer repair. They used to believe they were building something together. He wondered what Sarah would think if she could see him now, still cleaning offices, still struggling, but standing up instead of backing down. Probably she'd think he was being stupid, risking everything on principle. She had always been practical that way. Tuesday night, Christopher arrived for his shift to find a memo taped to his cart. Report to security office before starting shift. His stomach clenched. This was it. Somehow Thornton had found a way to push him out. David, the overnight security supervisor, looked uncomfortable when Christopher arrived. Smith, got a weird situation here. Someone filed a complaint that items have been going missing from floor 42. Office supplies, petty cash, that kind of thing. We're required to search all facility staff carts and lockers. You think I'm stealing office supplies?
No. Hell no. I know you, Smith. You're solid. But the complaint was filed, and we have to follow protocol. David gestured to another security guard. It'll be quick. Just procedure. They searched his cart, his locker, even had him empty his pockets. Found nothing, obviously, because there was nothing to find. David signed off on the paperwork with a disgusted expression. Someone's playing games. Watch your back, okay? Christopher started his shift 2 hours late, which meant rushing through his work, which meant not doing the thorough job he took pride in. He was finishing Victoria Sterling's office at 3 a.m. when he heard voices in the hallway. Loud, angry. One of them definitely Richard Thornton. The audit is a witch hunt, and you know it. You're targeting me because I questioned your qualifications. I'm targeting fraud, Richard. The fact that most of it leads back to your division isn't personal, it's evidence. Victoria's voice was controlled, but sharp. You've been billing personal expenses to the company for 3 years. Luxury hotels, first-class flights to destinations that have nothing to do with business, gifts for board members' spouses. It's all documented. You can't prove intent. Those were legitimate business expenses.
A $5,000 handbag from Prada is not a legitimate business expense, Richard. Neither is the $20,000 watch you charged to the company card as a client gift that somehow ended up in your possession. Christopher froze, mop in hand, caught between staying and eavesdropping, or leaving and drawing attention to himself. He chose staying still, hoping they wouldn't notice the cracked office door. "You're making a mistake," Thornton said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "I have friends on this board. I have allies in this company. Your father knew how to work with people like me. He understood that sometimes you overlook small indiscretions for the sake of the bigger picture. My father built this company on integrity. He wouldn't have tolerated theft no matter who was doing it. Your father also didn't put incompetent children in charge of billion-dollar companies. But here we are." Christopher heard a sharp intake of breath. Then Victoria's voice, colder than he'd ever heard it. "Get out of my sight, Richard. And when the board votes next month, remember that I have documentation for every charge, every expense, every lie you've told. I'm not my father. I won't look the other way." Footsteps. Christopher pressed himself against the wall behind the door as Thornton stormed past, his face flushed with rage. A few seconds later, Victoria appeared in her office doorway, saw Christopher, and her professional mask cracked slightly. "You heard that?" "Yes, ma'am. I should have announced myself." She walked into her office, sat heavily in her chair. "It's fine. Everyone's going to know soon enough anyway." She looked up at him. "He's going to escalate. The board vote is 3 weeks away. He'll do whatever he can to discredit me. Before then, to make me look incompetent or unstable or unfit to lead. And he'll hurt anyone he thinks is on my side." "Is that why someone filed a fake theft complaint against me tonight?" Her eyes widened. "What?" Christopher explained the search, the delay, David's warning. Victoria's expression went from shocked to furious. "That vindictive bastard! He's trying to intimidate you, to scare you away from this floor." "He's going to have to try harder than that." "Christopher, can I call you Christopher?" At his nod, she continued. "You don't owe me this. You don't owe me your job or your security. If you want to request a transfer to a different floor, I'll make sure it happens with no negative impact to your record."
"Do you want me to transfer?" "No. Honestly, having someone around at night who isn't trying to undermine me has been the best part of these long work sessions. But I won't ask you to keep putting yourself at risk." Christopher thought about Emma, about the benefits package, about the promise he'd made to stand up for what was right. "I'm not transferring, but I am going to keep my eyes open, and if I see anything else suspicious, I'm documenting it." Victoria smiled, a real smile this time. "Thank you. And Christopher, for what it's worth, I think your daughter is lucky to have you." Wednesday brought a new complication. Christopher arrived for his shift to find that his access card had been deactivated for floor 42. He had to call David from the stairwell to get it fixed, which took another hour out of his schedule. David was apologetic, but suspicious. "Someone put in a work order to revoke your access, said you were being transferred, but there's no transfer paperwork in the system." "Someone's trying to make my job impossible," Christopher said. "Yeah, well, they're doing it through official channels, which means someone with system access, which means corporate level." David fixed the access card. "Smith, seriously, watch your back. Whoever's doing this has resources." Thursday night, Christopher found a manila envelope on his cleaning card. Inside were photographs. Him talking to Victoria Sterling in her office, him in the break room during his lunch break, him entering and leaving the building. Surveillance photos, dozens of them, and a note, typed, untraceable. "You're being watched. Stay in your lane." He showed them to Victoria during her late-night work session, watched her face go pale with anger. This is harassment. This is illegal surveillance. I'm calling our legal department first thing in the morning. Don't, Christopher's voice was firm. Not yet. If you escalate now, Thornton or whoever's behind this will know they got to me. They'll know it's working. Let them think I'm scared. Are you scared? He thought about it honestly. Yes. But I've been scared before. When Emma was first diagnosed and the doctor explained what juvenile arthritis could mean long-term, I was terrified. When Sarah left and I realized I was going to raise Emma alone on a janitor's salary, I was scared. But scared doesn't mean stopped. Victoria studied the photographs spread across her desk. These were taken over several days. Someone's been following you. They know your route to work, your schedule, where you pick up Emma from school. Her voice tightened. They're threatening your daughter. Christopher's hands clenched. He hadn't thought about that angle, had been too focused on the immediate threat to himself. But Victoria was right. These photos showed Emma, showed our apartment building, showed Mrs. Chen walking Emma home from the bus stop. If they touch my daughter, they won't. Victoria's voice was steel, because we're going to be smarter than they are. I'm hiring private security for you and Emma. Don't argue, she said as he opened his mouth to protest. This is non-negotiable. Someone will be watching your apartment, following Emma to and from school, making sure she's safe. You won't see them, but they'll be there. Miss Sterling, Victoria, please. We're past formalities at this point. She gathered the photos into a folder. I'm also documenting all of this. Every harassment attempt, every intimidation tactic. When I present to the board, this comes with it. Evidence that Thornton is willing to threaten employees to protect himself. You think it's definitely him? I think he's the one with the most to lose. But you're right that we shouldn't tip our hand yet. She locked the folder in her desk drawer. In the meantime, I want you to be careful. Vary your routine where you can, stay alert, and if anything else happens, anything at all, you tell me immediately.
Friday night was quiet. Too quiet. Christopher moved through his shift, waiting for the next attack, the next threat, but nothing came. Just the usual work. Mopping floors, cleaning windows, emptying trash bins. He told himself that was good, that maybe showing the photos had been enough to scare Emma off and they'd leave him alone now. But Saturday afternoon, when he picked Emma up from ballet class, he noticed the black sedan parked across the street. It followed them on the bus, stayed 3 cars back when they got off at their stop, then disappeared around the corner as they entered their apartment building. Christopher called Victoria from his apartment, keeping his voice low so Emma wouldn't hear. Someone followed us home from ballet. That's the security I hired. His name is Marcus Chen, no relation to your babysitter. Former military, works for a very discreet firm I've used before. He'll keep his distance, but he'll make sure you're both safe. Christopher looked out the window, seeing nothing, which was probably the point. This is escalating fast. Yes, which means we're getting close to something they're desperate to hide. Victoria paused. Christopher, I need to ask you something. The night you interrupted Thornton and me in the conference room, why did you really do it? You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything. You risked your job for a stranger. He thought about how to explain it, about the moment he'd heard that catch in her voice and seen himself 3 years ago, backed into corners by people with more power, more money, more everything. He told her about his ex-wife, who said he'd never be successful, said he was too soft, too idealistic, too willing to help other people instead of fighting for himself. She said those things like they were weaknesses. They're not weaknesses. I know that now. But for a long time, I believed her. I believed that caring about people, that standing up for what's right, even when it costs you something, I believed that was why I'd failed, why I was just a janitor with a sick kid and no prospects. I realized that night in the conference room that I had a choice. I could teach her those values and then fail to live them myself,
Or I could show her what it looks like to actually be the person I was teaching her to be. So you interrupted a corporate power struggle to set a good example for your daughter. I interrupted because someone needed help, and I could provide it. That's all. That's enough. Victoria was quiet for a moment. My father used to say that character is what you do when no one's watching and nothing's riding on it except your own integrity. You have remarkable character, Christopher. I'm just trying to survive and raise my kid right. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, I think they might be the same thing. Monday morning, Christopher took Emma to school, then came home to sleep. But at 2 p.m. his phone rang. Emma's school, the principal's office. His heart stopped. Mr. Smith, this is Principal Davidson. Emma's fine, but there's been an incident. Someone tried to pick her up from school claiming to be a family friend. Our staff didn't release her, but I think you should come down here. Christopher was out the door in 30 seconds, running the 8 blocks to Rosewood Elementary in 6 minutes flat. He found Emma in the principal's office with her teacher, Miss Rodriguez, looking confused but unharmed. "Daddy!" She ran to him and he caught her, checking her over with shaking hands. "I'm okay," she said, puzzled by his panic. "The lady just said she knew you and was supposed to take me to ballet early, but Ms. Rodriguez said she wasn't on my approved list." Principal Davidson, a tall woman with steel gray hair and kind eyes, pulled Christopher aside. The woman matched no one on Emma's emergency contact list. She had no ID when we asked. When Ms. Rodriguez refused to release Emma, she left immediately. We called the police, but she was gone before they arrived.
Christopher's vision went red at the edges. They'd come after Emma. They'd actually come after his daughter. He pulled out his phone, called Victoria, explained in terse sentences what had happened. "I'm sending Marcus to the school now," she said immediately, "and I'm calling my lawyer. This crosses every line. We're going to the police with everything, the photos, the harassment, the attempted abduction." "No." Christopher's voice was cold. "Not yet. If we go to the police now, Thornton will lawyer up, claim he had nothing to do with it, hide behind corporate attorneys. I want him exposed in front of the board, in front of the whole company. I want everyone to see exactly who he is." "Christopher, they targeted your daughter." "I know, which is why I'm not backing down. They think this will scare me off? It just made me angrier." He looked at Emma, who was drawing at the principal's desk, already recovered from the incident in the resilient way of children. "Can Marcus stay close to Emma, actually close where she can see him?" "Absolutely. I'll brief him on the situation. Emma will have a shadow from now until this is resolved." That night, Christopher arrived at Sterling Dynamics with a purpose that went beyond cleaning floors. He documented everything. Every office he entered, every paper on every desk, every conversation he overheard from corporate executives working late. He took photos of Thornton's office layout, noted which files were left unsecured, observed the patterns of who came and went from the executive floor. He wasn't looking for anything specific. He was just watching, waiting, building a map of how things worked on floor 42. At 2 a.m., he was cleaning the conference room when he heard Thornton's voice again, this time on a phone call. The man's office door was cracked open and sound carried in the empty nighttime building. "I understand that the audit can't move forward. You promised me you'd have enough votes to block it. I don't care what it costs. Use the discretionary fund. Buy whoever needs buying." "No, the board meeting is 3 weeks out. That's plenty of time to discredit her. She's young, she's inexperienced, she's emotional. Make her look unstable." "The janitor? He's nothing. A single father with no resources? I've made it clear he should stay out of this. If he doesn't, we'll escalate." His phone was already recording, the voice memo app capturing every word. He stood frozen in the conference room, barely breathing as Thornton continued to outline his plan, bribing board members, spreading rumors about Victoria's competence, and planting false stories about company losses under her leadership. When Thornton finally ended the call, he saved the recording,
backed it up to 3 different cloud services, and texted Victoria. "I have something. Don't come to the office. Too risky. I'll call you when my shift ends." Her response came immediately. "Are you safe?" "Yes, but we need to talk. This ends now." The next 2 weeks were a careful dance. Christopher continued his normal routine, showed no sign that anything had changed, played the role of scared janitor who had learned his lesson. He varied his route home, kept Emma close, trusted Marcus Chen's invisible presence to keep them safe. But every night at Sterling Dynamics, he documented everything. He recorded 2 more phone calls, photographed documents left carelessly on Thornton's desk, noted which board members visited Thornton's office late at night. He built a case, piece by piece, of systematic corruption and intimidation. Victoria worked her own angles, compiling the audit results, preparing her presentation, quietly building support among board members who weren't in Thornton's pocket. They met only occasionally, always careful, always in her office late at night when the building was empty except for Christopher and the security staff. "The board meeting is Thursday," she said one Tuesday night, 3 days out. "I'm presenting at 2 p.m. I have the audit results, the documentation of expense fraud, and testimony from 3 other employees Thornton harassed or intimidated. But I'm still not sure I have enough votes."
What if you had recorded proof that he's bribing board members? Her head snapped up. You found something. Christopher pulled out his phone, played the recordings, watched Victoria's expression shift from shock to grim satisfaction. "This is everything," she breathed. "This proves conspiracy to defraud the company, witness intimidation, bribery. With this, we don't just fire him, we press criminal charges. Then we release it at the board meeting, in front of everyone. Let them hear exactly who they've been protecting." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. "You know this will blow back on you. Thornton will claim you're lying, that the recordings are fake, and that you're just a disgruntled employee who is mad about being searched for theft. He'll try to destroy your reputation." "Let him try. I've got nothing to hide and nothing to lose except this job. And if Sterling Dynamics fires me for exposing corruption, then it's not a company worth working for anyway." She smiled slightly. "You sound like my father. He used to say that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing." "Edmund Burke," Christopher said. "I read that quote to Emma last week. We're doing a unit on courage in her class. She wanted to know what real courage looked like." "What did you tell her?" "I told her, courage is being afraid but doing the right thing anyway. I told her that standing up to bullies matters, even when the bullies have more power than you. I told her that one person who refuses to be silent can change everything." He met Victoria's eyes. "Now I have to prove I meant it." Thursday morning, Christopher took Emma to school, then came home to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the board meeting at 2 p.m., about Victoria standing in front of powerful people and calling out corruption, about his recordings that could change everything or ruin both their lives. At noon, he gave up on sleep, showered, and put on the only suit he owned, a second-hand gray number he'd bought for job interviews 3 years ago. It was slightly too big, the tie slightly wrong, but it was the best he had. Mrs. Chen arrived at 12:30 to watch Emma after school. She looked at him in the suit and smiled. "Important meeting?" "Something like that." "You look good, like a man with purpose." She squeezed his arm. "Whatever this is, you'll do well. You're a good man, Christopher Smith. Good men win sometimes." He made it to Sterling Dynamics by 1:45 p.m., rode the elevator to floor 42, and found Victoria in her office pacing in a navy suit that screamed authority. She looked younger than usual, nervous in a way he'd never seen. "I wasn't sure you would come." "I told you I would." "I know, but I also know you have a daughter to think about, and this could get ugly." She handed him a visitor's badge. "The board meeting is in the executive conference room. I've arranged for you to be there as my guest.
I told him you're providing testimony related to the audit. They're expecting you. How many board members are there? 13, including me. I need 7 votes to pass my recommendations. Right now, I have 5 confirmed. 3 are firmly in Thornton's pocket. The other 5 are undecided, which means persuadable. She checked her watch. We need to go. The executive conference room was on the 45th floor, a massive space with a table that could seat 30 people and windows overlooking the entire city. 12 people were already seated, men and women in expensive suits, all older than Victoria, all watching her with expressions ranging from supportive to openly hostile.
5 years after that pivotal board meeting, Christopher stood in a television studio, adjusting the microphone clipped to his collar. The producer counted down, and suddenly he was live on a national morning show, talking about his book, From Invisible to Invaluable, How One Voice Changed a Company. The host, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, leaned forward with genuine interest. Christopher, your story has inspired millions, but I want to ask you something people might not expect. Do you ever regret speaking up that night? Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you'd stayed silent? Christopher considered the question carefully. Every brave choice carries a cost. I could have kept my head down, kept my safe job, avoided all the conflict and struggle that followed. But I would have taught my daughter that safety is more important than integrity, that fear is stronger than courage. I couldn't live with that lesson. Your daughter, Emma, is 14 now, correct? How has she processed everything that happened? She understands that our family story isn't about me being a hero. It's about making a choice when you have something to lose. Emma watched me struggle, watched me doubt myself, watched me face people who wanted me to fail, but she also watched me get back up every time. That's the real lesson, not that brave people are fearless, but that they choose courage despite the fear. After the interview, Christopher returned to Sterling Dynamics headquarters, now housed in a new building designed with input from employees at every level. The architecture reflected the company's transformed values: open spaces, natural light, collaboration areas, and yes, a dedicated break room for facilities staff with the same quality furniture and amenities as the executive lounge. His office was on the 10th floor now, with a view of the city and a door that was always open unless he was in a sensitive meeting. The framed photo of his old cleaning cart still hung on the wall, but it was joined by others. Emma at her middle school graduation, the Sterling Dynamics team celebrating their ranking as the #1 employer in their industry, Christopher receiving a Community Leadership Award. His assistant, Marcus, yes, the same Marcus from security who'd helped him years ago, poked his head in. "Boss, you've got the new employee orientation in 15 minutes. And Emma called, something about needing you to sign a permission slip for the debate team trip." Christopher smiled. Emma had inherited his tendency to speak up, but unlike him, she'd never learned to stay silent in the first place. She was captain of her debate team, student council representative, and had already announced her intention to study labor law in college. "Tell her I'll sign it tonight. And Marcus, thanks for keeping me on schedule." "That's what I'm here for. Also, FYI, Gregory Walsh submitted his resignation this morning." Christopher looked up sharply. Walsh had been a thorn in his side for 5 years, fighting every progressive policy, undermining initiatives, creating obstacles wherever possible. He say why? His letter mentioned fundamental disagreements with company direction and inability to thrive in the current culture. Marcus grinned. Translation? He finally realized this company isn't going back to the way it was. "I should feel relieved," said Christopher slowly. "But mostly, I just feel sad. Walsh could have been part of building something better. He chose resentment instead." "You can't save everyone, boss. Some people are too invested in the old way." The new employee orientation was held in the main auditorium,
Another change Christopher had implemented. Instead of a dry HR presentation in a conference room, new hires spent their first day hearing from employees at every level about what made Sterling Dynamics different. Christopher always opened these sessions personally. He stood on the stage, looking out at 47 new faces, facilities workers, engineers, accountants, security staff, administrative assistants, software developers, and began the way he always did. 5 years ago, I was where some of you are now. First day at Sterling Dynamics, nervous about making a good impression, hoping this job would be the stability my family needed. I was hired as a night shift janitor. I pushed a cleaning cart through these halls for 8 months, trying to stay invisible.
He let that sink in. Today, I'm Vice President of People and Culture. I'm telling you this not to brag, but to make something clear. At Sterling Dynamics, we mean it when we say every voice matters. Your title doesn't determine your value. Your courage, your integrity, your willingness to speak up when something's wrong, that's what determines your value here. A young woman in the front row raised her hand tentatively. But what if speaking up costs you your job? What if you're wrong? Those are exactly the right fears to have, Christopher said honestly. Speaking up is risky, but I promise you this. At this company, staying silent when you witness wrongdoing will cost you more than speaking up ever will. We've built systems, anonymous reporting, ombudsman services, whistleblower protections, specifically to make it safe to do the right thing. Will it always be easy? No. Will it always be comfortable? Definitely not. But it will always be supported. After the orientation, Christopher walked through the building, something he did daily. He stopped by the facilities break room where Maria, the woman he'd trained to replace him, was now the department supervisor. She was mentoring a new hire, showing her the ropes with the same care Christopher had shown her. He visited the mailroom, the security desk, the cafeteria. He knew people's names, asked about their families, listened to their concerns. This was the job. Not the executive meetings or the strategic planning sessions, but this, staying connected to the people who made the company run. Victoria found him in the cafeteria sharing coffee with a group of customer service representatives who were frustrated with a new software system. She waited until the conversation concluded, then walked with him back toward the elevators. "You're still doing it," she observed. "Doing what?" "Building relationships from the bottom up instead of the top down. Most VPs would have their assistants handle employee complaints. Most VPs didn't start as janitors. I can't afford to forget where I came from. The minute I do, I lose what makes me effective in this role." They rode the elevator in comfortable silence. Their partnership had evolved over 5 years into something more than Boston employee. They were colleagues, collaborators, bound by the shared experience of choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. "I got a call from the CEO of Meridian Corp. They want to know if you'd be willing to consult on their workplace culture transformation. Apparently, our story has inspired them to examine their own practices." "What did you tell them?" "That I'd ask you. It would mean travel, probably 1 week a month for 6 months, but it would also mean spreading what we've built here to other companies, other employees, multiplying the impact." Christopher thought about Emma, about missing dinners and school events. But he also thought about all the employees at Meridian Corp who might be pushing cleaning carts right now, staying invisible, waiting for someone to show them that courage was possible. "Let me talk to Emma. If she's okay with it, I'm in." That evening, he laid out the opportunity over dinner. Homemade lasagna, Emma's current favorite. She listened carefully, asking smart questions about what the consulting would involve, how often he'd be gone, whether it would interfere with her debate competitions. "So, basically, you'd be helping other companies stop being terrible to their employees." "That's one way to put it." "Then you should do it." She said it with the confidence of someone who'd grown up watching her father choose courage. "You're good at helping people, Dad, and if you can help more people, you should."
Even if it means I'm traveling more?
"I'm 14. I'm not a baby who needs you here every second. Plus, Mrs. Chen is basically my second mom anyway." Emma grinned. "And you'd be doing exactly what you always tell me to do, using your voice to make things better." 2 weeks later, Christopher started consulting with Meridian Corp, then Bennett Industries, then Cascade Technologies. Word spread through business circles. The janitor who became a VP, who transformed a company's culture, could help others do the same. He never forgot where he came from. Every consulting engagement started the same way. Christopher spending his first 3 days working alongside frontline employees, listening to their stories, understanding their struggles. Only then would he meet with executives to deliver the hard truths they needed to hear. Some companies embraced the changes, others resisted, and Christopher walked away, unwilling to waste time on organizations that weren't genuinely committed to transformation. He could afford to be selective now, not just financially, but ethically. He'd learned that his story, his voice, his experience had value, and he wouldn't compromise that value for anyone. 7 years after that pivotal night, Christopher received a call from a reporter at Forbes. They wanted to feature him in an article about leadership lessons from unexpected places. During the interview, the reporter asked, "What advice would you give to someone in a situation like yours was, someone who sees wrongdoing but is afraid to speak up?" Christopher thought about the scared janitor he'd been, about the recordings on his phone, about the moment he'd decided that silence was more dangerous than risk. "I'd tell them that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something matters more than your fear. For me, it was my daughter. I couldn't teach her to be brave if I wasn't willing to be brave myself. But it could be anything. Your integrity, your values, your belief that people deserve better. Find the thing that matters more than your fear and hold on to it when things get hard." And they will get hard? They absolutely will get hard. Speaking up costs something, always. But staying silent costs more. It costs your self-respect, your integrity, your ability to look at yourself in the mirror. I'd rather lose a job than lose those things. The Forbes article ran with the headline, "From Night Shift to C-Suite, How Christopher Smith Proves That Courage is the Ultimate Leadership Skill." It was shared thousands of times, sparked conversations in boardrooms and break rooms across the country. But the moment that mattered most came on a random Tuesday evening, 7 years and 3 months after everything changed. Christopher was reading in the living room while Emma did homework at the kitchen table. She called out to him, "Dad, can you help me with something?" He joined her at the table. "What's up, Butterfly?" "I'm writing an essay about someone who inspires me. Can I write about you?" Christopher felt his throat tighten. "You can write about anyone you want, but I'm curious, why me?" Emma looked at him with those hazel eyes that saw everything. "Because you taught me that being brave isn't about being strong or powerful or important. It's about doing the right thing even when you're scared, even when you have everything to lose. You were just a janitor, Dad. You didn't have money or power or connections, but you had courage, and that changed everything."
"I wasn't just a janitor," Christopher said softly. "I was a father trying to do right by his daughter. That's what gave me courage." "Exactly," Emma smiled. "You did it for me. Now I'm going to do it for someone else. That's how courage spreads, right? One person shows another person that it's possible, and they show someone else, and eventually the whole world changes." Christopher pulled his daughter into a hug, thinking about that night 7 years ago when he'd stood in a conference room and gambled everything on the belief that truth mattered more than safety. Thinking about all the lives that had changed because he'd refused to stay silent. Thinking about Emma, who would carry that lesson forward into a world that desperately needed people willing to speak up. One person, one choice. Everything changed, and it was still changing, rippling outward in ways he'd never imagined, touching lives he'd never meet, inspiring courage in people who were right now pushing their own cleaning carts, working their own invisible jobs, wondering if they had the strength to speak up. The answer was yes, they did, because courage, Christopher had learned, wasn't something you were born with. It was something you chose, again and again, every time it mattered. And it always mattered. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and become part of a community that refuses to accept injustice, celebrates everyday heroes, and believes that your story, yes, yours, might be the one that changes everything.